All right, we are live. Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulties. YouTube was being super fun and taking me to the wrong page, but we figured it out. It's all good. And I'm here this morning with Sonia, and we are going to talk about animal communication because a lot of people misunderstand what it is and how it works. So we thought we'd answer some of the most frequent questions that we commonly get about the therapy in general. Sonia, do you want to start us off by giving us a general or how you define animal communication?
Sure. So, hi everyone. Hi Jesse. So, for me, animal communication is telepathy. It's just communicating um, in a different language than what we use. It's not like, regular communication as, we would have human to human. Um, Animal communication is communicating through emotions, through um, images we may get, communicating through sounds. Sometimes we may get words, sentences. So it's a different way of communicating.
That's a good way to describe it. A lot of people think that you can kind of just turn it on and off. It's something you can use as kind of like a party trick or something. And usually, or I guess people's reaction sometimes when they find out that you do it, they're like, "Oh, here, talk to my dog right now." And it's definitely more it's kind of a deep intuitive conversation, but you have to be in the right mental space to actually go into it, which is really important because similar to other forms of energy work, you have to be in a grounded place because otherwise you start picking up their emotions, things that they're hearing and seeing and feeling, and it can be very, very overwhelming. Do you
Mm.
find that happens to you sometimes?
Yes, and I think it's all about making the difference between, your mind and your intuition, that place, where you just are grounded, as you were saying, and you just let go of the mind. And I think that's where the trick is because, if we're not in that centered place, then the mind may take over. And especially when we start, we want to get messages. And so it's hard to let go of thoughts we may have and, just the mind. And animal communication and practicing, it's all about letting go, not having expectation, just be in the present moment, and just it becomes natural once you are in that space. But yeah, it's all about cultivating that space, and the more you practice, the easier it becomes um, to get into that space where you can just communicate and it's flowing. And sometimes um, and it happens to me not all the time, but sometimes I'll get messages from an animal I communicated with weeks ago, and it's just coming by just to say hi, like I'm feeling, like that, or please pass on that message. And I didn't, intend to communicate with that animal specifically at that moment, but sometimes they just, pop by and say hi. But it's all about cultivating that um, yeah, that state of being.
Do you have specific techniques that you use to kind of get yourself in that grounded state? Because I know you also do Reiki as well. And for me, I did Reiki first. So I kind of used a similar approach when I started animal communication. It was very similar. And I actually started getting messages before I was actually trained in animal communication. There is some formal things that you need to know, but most people have an intuitive knack for it. But I find that knowing those grounding practices helps me keep that their stuff, and my stuff. So what grounding practices do you use?
I use many different ones. It's true that Reiki, is a beautiful doorway towards, learning animal communication. You learn meditation, you learn basic practices. Like I'm a yoga instructor as well, so I'm used to meditate, and meditation definitely helps getting into that state of grounding. But there are different ways, you can get into that state. Just walking in nature. It's all about just being in the present moment, being aware of your body, because I find that the body really helps with animal communication. You can get messages through your own body as well. So being really aware of the body, and again, letting go of, like thoughts, and being in that space where there's no expectation and everything is flowing. It's hard to describe because you really need to experience it to understand. But you can get to that state if you practice meditation regularly.
I find that sometimes people have different grounding practices based on their background. Like some people are very soothed by the ocean. And personally, for me, it's the forest. So usually when I start, I sit here in this chair and I kind of imagine I'm a tree. It sounds kind of strange, but
No.
imagine the roots going down from my feet and kind of absorbing some of that earth energy, which is very, very grounding for me. And I also have a lot of green things in my room, plants everywhere. There's another one in front of me that help kind of keep me earthbound almost. And sometimes it's just different things work for different people. But I want to talk a little bit about what kinds of information people can receive, because usually when people go into a session, they say, here's my list of questions. I want answers to all of these questions, and let's start. And it can be really overwhelming because a lot of people don't understand that you may not get answers to all of your questions.
Yeah.
You, the animal communicator, can only pass on what information you get, and only if the animal says that it's okay to pass that on, because there's some things they just want to like vent about, right? So what kinds of information do you typically receive?
It depends completely on the animal, because as you were saying, people may give you a list, the guardian may give you a list, and the animal sometimes doesn't want to talk about that at all.
Mhm.
It's not an issue for the animal. The animal sees the issue or the problematic somewhere else.
Mhm.
So maybe the questions are absolutely not relevant to him or her, right? So yes, sometimes they may not get their answers, their questions answered, but the core of the problematic may shift to someplace else, and the guardian will get a different perspective on the situation, and that can be enlightening to the person. But that may take the guardian, off guard, because the person was not expecting that at all. So that doesn't happen all the times, but that's something that can definitely happen.
In our run through talk before, you said that a lot of people assume animal communication is complicated, and that you have to be born with this gift to be able to do it. Can you just go over a bit about what you said? So I thought that was really interesting.
To me, it's something that is not woo-woo, that is not weird, that is, it's none of that. To me, it has always been something that is very simple, and that anybody, really anybody, can learn. Yes, of course, certain people, it's easier for them, but it's something that anybody can do with practice. It's all about practice and learning some basic techniques to get into that space, as I was saying earlier. So it's really accessible to anybody. It's just being able to be centered, to be in the present moment, to be in connection with your body, to open your heart, to also not have expectations, because I find that at the beginning you have expectations, and that may be yeah, that may prevent the communication from flowing, because it's very easy. And we all get telepathic communication, like from our animals, from our pets, but even between, like, from human to human. We're just not aware that it is telepathic communication, because we don't know how it works. We've never learned that, right? Like, that's not something that we are taught, in school, or from our parents or anybody, unless as an adult, usually we go learn it. But it happens all the time. We're just not aware of it.
Based on the description of the person that is able to do it, being open-minded and having an open heart and being, open to receive that kind of information, do you think that children would be better at it than adults?
Uh, I would say yes, because kids are, more in that energy of being fully present to what they do, to be completely open. Um, they don't have, that cluttered mind that we adults have. So it's a lot easier for them to receive an communication. But they also do it as babies. Like, babies communicate with their parents telepathically.
Mhm.
That's normal. We just, as parents, we're not used to receive messages like that, but it's something that definitely happens.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
And actually, parents can learn to communicate with their babies, that way.
I've never thought about it, but I'm thinking now it would be totally possible if you were open to that kind of thing, because babies don't have verbal communication yet. It would be an easier way to understand what they need and want, rather than listening to them cry for 5 hours trying to figure it out.
Oh yeah, yeah. There are, like, people teach those techniques to be able to communicate with babies, and to, for instance, know why they're crying, why, like, whatever the problem may be, and it's super easy to learn.
Do you find that because humans are technically animals, do you sometimes or ever pick up on people conversations or things that they're thinking, or is it more you try to keep it separate?
Um, yeah, I can pick up, the vibe of someone, and what blockages they may have. It's not what they're thinking at this specific moment in time. It's more personally, I can pick up on the vibe and blockages they may have, whether it's in the body or um, in their mind, like limiting beliefs and that type of thing. But it's something that you can do as well. There's no limitation, in terms of telepathic communication, because I know people who do communicate with people who are in coma, for instance.
Okay.
So you can definitely do that.
Speaking of limitations, a lot of people only consider animal communication once their animal has passed over. And when I did my training, the lady broke it down into 3 separate learnings. One is beginner for animals that are alive with us, one for animals that have passed over, and a third, very advanced one for animals that are lost. So I thought we could talk a bit about that because I know we were talking about this earlier, but the energy of talking with animals that are alive versus past is very different.
Yeah, I find personally, because everybody's different and may perceive the energy differently, but I personally find that a, there is a difference in the energy of the animal when he or she is in the body versus, once they've transitioned. I find that when they are in the body, they can be very, down to earth and just, have concerns about, when they're going to eat or, like just their regular life. Sometimes they are more, I would say, spiritual, and we may have the discussions about more, spiritual topics. But I find that once they've transitioned, the energy um, is the vibration is higher, and they tend to um, pass on messages that are more spiritual. I find, more deep messages, profound messages that about their human. Um, it's no longer about earthly concerns like once they were in the body.
I think that's really interesting because, and we've talked about this before too, but everybody kind of perceives it differently. So some communicators may feel a difference between animals that are alive and animals that have passed. But I did 10 case studies on animals that are alive before I attempted animals that have passed. But I found that it was similar to what you feel, but it was kind of like making a long distance call where sometimes the voice cuts in and out and it's a little bit further for animals that have passed over. But for animals that are alive, it's similar to them sitting in the same room. It's where it's just having a face-to-face conversation. But usually for animals that are alive, I find that the conversations are about things like, oh, I don't like this new person that lived in the house, or oh, I didn't like going for a walk to that park because that dog I didn't like is there, or the horse decides he doesn't like this new herd mate that came in, or their food is messed up and they want someone to change it. But it's usually more about base relationships between things
Mm-hmm.
and how they feel about certain things. But then you get some that say, "Oh, my favorite color is blue and I like fish treats the best." But then you get some that are deeply concerned about their owners and they have very specific questions and things that they want to pass on to help their owner heal through something.
Mm.
So, what kinds of questions do you get from animals that are alive versus animals that have passed?
It's very similar to what you were saying. Animals that are still in the body, they, yeah, they may pass on messages about um, their person, and how to help them. They want to help them. And I had that not too long ago with a bunny, actually. That was really cute. And it's the first time also that happened to me. It's actually like the lady contacted me and she said, "Oh, I don't know what's going on, but I've been thinking about doing an animal communication with my bunny. lately it's on my mind, and it's very persistent. And when I did the communication, the bunny said, yeah, I actually, pushed really hard to get that communication done. And that was funny because that bunny really wanted to help her person, because she's going through major changes right now. And um, and uh, the bunny wanted to be kind of comforting to the person, saying, I'm here, and you need some grounding right now. You're not grounded enough. And so she passed on some really simple um, practices that the person can do to ground herself. But it was really a beautiful message to help her person get grounded through and go through that period in her life where she's going through some major changes. So but yeah, when once animals have transitioned, um, it's more about again, it's different from one animal to the next, but in general, it's they want to make sure that their person is okay, that to kind of reassure their person that they're still there, that they are still looking over them, and that they're still present in their life. I had one, I just remember, that was really, really adorable. That was a Yorkshire, and I helped the animal transition. I think he was 18 or 19, and he had many health issues. And so once he transitioned, maybe a few weeks later, I can't remember, a month later, he just, visited me. And at first, I didn't even recognize him because he looked so different. He looked so healthy. His coat was shiny, and but I recognized his energy. And he just said to me, he said, "Please tell my person that I'm well. I'm happy where I am." Because there was so much guilt, with that person, making the decision to put down her pet. And so the animal wanted to make sure that, like, don't worry, like, I'm fine. And the person was, she was pregnant. She was like, it was really early on. And the dog said to me, oh, and I know, like, the sex of the baby, she's expecting a little boy. And so give me shivers. And so I contacted the person. I said, oh, guess what, like, like, Winnie visited me, and I passed on the message, and I said, he told me also, the sex of the baby, like, do you want me to tell you? Like, I would never say, upfront. And she said, oh yeah, sure, I want to know, actually, like, in a few weeks we'll know, so I'll be able to confirm, if that's correct. And I said, yeah, he said it's a boy, and that was a boy. But that was just the cutest little thing, so yeah.
That some of the stories are just amazing. I've had, I think it was the first 2 or 3 that I did, because I volunteered it on my Facebook page. Anybody that's interested, the first 10 people, I'll do a communication for you. And half of them started crying when I told them, not because the information triggered them, but just because they were so happy to have that information and that experience of being able to talk to them. And it's just such a powerful thing, because I've had some that triggered me, not because there's anything wrong with the dog, but one of the cases that I worked on, I think it was about a 3-year-old dog, bit a child because the child was running around and then tried to take something out of his mouth, and nobody was watching. the child, I guess, and draw blood. So the people reported the dog to the town, and the town said that the dog had to be destroyed because it bit a child. Perfectly healthy 3-year-old dog, and the owners were, of course, devastated. But they messaged me and they said, "Can you do this today? Because the appointment is tomorrow morning."
Oh.
So of course I agreed to do it, and they just wanted to pass on that, they weren't upset at the dog. They knew it wasn't the dog's fault, and to kind of give them closure on understanding that this was their last day now with their dog, and they wanted to know what the dog wanted to do for her last day. And I'm talking to her, and she goes, "I understand what I did, and I understand that the other people weren't happy about it, and this is what's going to happen." And I kind of had to explain to her what euthanasia is and have that conversation. And then she kind of just stops for a minute and goes, "Oh, okay." No questions, just completely understanding. And then I passed along that they wanted to know what she wanted to do for her last day. And she said, "I want to go to the beach and I want to have some ice cream." So the family, they have 2 young kids, and they packed up the dog and they had a beach day with their dog. And I knew as I ended the session that I was going to be the last one to ever talk to this dog. So I'm trying to, give her almost just to reassure her that it's okay that she passes on, that her family will have closure, and that if they ever want to reach out to her again, I'd be happy to facilitate that for her, because she may have something that she wants to pass on later. But as soon as I stopped the session and hung up the call and kind of took a breath, I just started bawling my eyes out, because it's so raw, the emotion that that dog was feeling, that I could feel the tightness in my chest and in my neck just from the raw pain that that dog was feeling. And it's just absolutely devastating sometimes. But it makes me realize how much of a difference that we can make for people just by doing something that to us is very simple and straightforward. But
Yeah. So that's so true, because people tend to contact me, when it's time perhaps to say goodbye. They want to make sure that that's the right time. So those situations are obviously emotionally charged, same as, the one you went through. And so passing on messages in those moments can be incredibly healing for not only the people, the guardians, but also for the animal. So it is important work for sure.
I know I personally haven't worked with any animals that are lost in an official capacity, but I think you had a story about one.
Yeah, like I don't now I don't do animal communication for lost animals. That's something that I don't want to do anymore, because it's too um, it's too difficult emotionally, not only for the people but for me as well, because we're never 100% sure, of the information that we may receive. There's always like a percentage of error, so you don't want to convey information that may be wrong, and then it creates like frustration. It's just very difficult. I've done it with friends, and I'm thinking of one not too long ago. it's a cat that, an outdoor cat, and he went out as he usually does, but didn't come back for, I don't know, like many days. That was very unusual. And so they asked me to get in contact with him. So it was funny because when I connected with him, he was just, outside doing his thing. And when I connected with him, he just said, "Oh, oh," he was just like so into his, hunting thing, or just, enjoying the outdoors, that he kind of lost track of time and realized that he was expected at home. That was just so funny. His reaction was like, "Oh, really? Like, is it like time to go home?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's been a few days now. Like, they're expecting you at home. They're worried." And after that communication, the day after, he went back home. So he was home. But I had, I think that was last week, another one, and very similar. The cat, well, actually, the guardian went on vacation, and the dad, that person's dad, was looking after the cat, and the cat didn't come home for a few days. And she's a very anxious cat. She has some anxiety issues, so they were really worried about her. And so I said to the person, "I'm not gonna do animal communication, but I'm gonna do Reiki." um, I find it's easier because I don't want to it's yeah, it was to the person who was really, really in a bad place. Like, so I was like, "Okay, let's just do the treatment." And 2 days after, the cat went back home. So, that's the way I work, and everybody's is different. But yeah, now I don't do animal communication with lost animals.
Luckily, that one turned out well.
Yeah.
I want to touch a little bit about difficult conversations, because sometimes, even for animals that are alive or have passed, they have information they want us to pass along that makes us uncomfortable, just because we're trying to figure out how to say it
Mm,
to the owner to come across as helpful, rather than your animal has a problem with XYZ.
mm,
It's more learning the language to get that across, but some of them are a little easier. One of the first cats that I worked on, um, he had a problem with the owner's boyfriend that had moved in. And it wasn't that the cat hated him, it was just that he was taking over his owner's attention and not giving any to the cat. So to figure out how to say that, I didn't, come across and say, "So your cat hates your boyfriend." It was more, your cat's having some difficulty with having somebody new in the house. And I think that having him interact with the cat more, or both of you together more, would help reassure him that he's not being ignored or put to the side. But sometimes the conversations are more difficult when they have a specific question and the animal just flat out says no.
mm,
And it's something like, "Are you okay if we, leave you here while we go on vacation for a week? And we'll have people check on you." And the animal's like, "No, I don't want to do that." And then they have to figure out something else, or something like, I don't know, the owner sometimes approaches with something like, "Is it time for my animal to pass on?"
right.
And then you can ask the animal, and they'll either say, "Yes, it is," which is a difficult conversation in itself. But sometimes it's no, because.
Mm,
And then they'll say either, "I want to help my owner get through this thing that's happening," or "I'm waiting for this thing to happen." And then the owner has to make that decision and either say that, "No, it's okay. for you to pass on or do the thing so that they can move on. Because a lot of times they're holding space for them to do that thing.
Yeah.
But I know sometimes you get difficult conversations. So how do you go about approaching those?
I think it's all about being, compassionate and just convey the message with, kindness, and that, in the end, it's up to the guardian to make whatever decision, they deem is the best one for their pet. So we're just there to help in the situation, but then the responsibility, lies in the hands of the guardian. So we're just here to help, and I see it that way, just to be as compassionate as possible. But yeah, when I started, it was very difficult for me to deal with those situations. I think now with experience, I've learned um, to really not necessarily convey all the information that is received, because sometimes the animal needs to share with somebody else, kind of the to share the what's going on, but the information, not everything is necessary to be passed on to the guardian. And then I've learned to really convey the core message. But compassion is crucial, I think, when you convey that type of message, and with kindness, and to remind the guardian that it's really up to them. We just conveying the message, but ultimately it's up to them. So we're here to help.
We're more facilitators than part of the conversation.
Yeah.
But you touched on responsibility, and us as animal communicators, we do have a certain responsibility to share in the most compassionate way and try to get a successful communication, which again is a different definition for some people. But for the people, it could be they just want answers to their questions. But for the animal, they just want to convey their thoughts and feelings, which may or may not match with what the owner wants. But I find in terms of our responsibility, we are not allowed to diagnose an animal. We can say that they seem to have some issue with their liver, but we can't say he has stage 4 liver cancer. It's more an observation, not a scientific diagnosis. I should state that. Responsibility, we're not supposed or not allowed to say that, if especially with lost animals, that the animal's dead.
Mm-hmm.
Because not only sometimes is the owner not ready for that, but we could be wrong.
Absolutely.
Right? And you do not want to start that conversation with the owner and then find out later that the animal's not, because they will stop looking for them. And that's a whole other emotional conversation. But never, ever tell a person that their animal's dead. That's not your responsibility.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, that's so important, because again, you're never 100% sure of what you receive. There's always that percentage of errors, so, and that can make a huge difference for the animal and his person. So yeah, I completely agree.
Just thought I'd touch on that because legal responsibility.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about working on our own pets. And me personally, I resisted talking to Kaya a little bit after I got my certification because I was kind of nervous. I was worried that it would be harder than it is with other people's animals. and I was worried that she would tell me something that I wasn't ready to hear.
Mm.
But a couple of weeks ago, I finally committed. I was like, tomorrow, I'm going to do it tomorrow. And I did it, and she had some, I actually have my notes here. She had some, it was, nothing super emotional. She said some things about the energy around her, and mostly it was just, I like this, I don't like this, or, my elbow hurts sometimes, and things like that. She said she wants more walks, specifically in the morning and the afternoon that we've been having. She says she wants play dates in small groups with other dogs, not big groups, but just little groups.
Okay.
Very specifically gave me examples of dogs that she likes.
Wow.
She says that she wants Rescue Remedy, which is a Bach flower essence that kind of calms them down, anytime before I cut her nails or take her on a car drive longer than 15 minutes.
Okay.
So she does not like the car, so she's very specific about that. And she said that we're doing a reno here. It was supposed to be this year, but our architect messed up, and it's going to be next year. But I asked her how she felt about the renovation, and she said, I like the idea of the renovation because my stepdad is moving in, and he's one of her absolute favorite people. So that was one reason she liked it. The other was that when my mom works, she used to have to be shut downstairs for the people that didn't like being around dogs. But once the reno's done, she'll have more free reign of the house. So she said, I like it because this.
Yeah.
So she has a lot of opinion. She's definitely very vocal about it. I probably shouldn't have been so worried about it, but the first time we did one with her, I had somebody else do it for her birthday last year. And we were talking about her food. And she had very specific opinion. She said, your dog likes the garden and being outside smelling the flowers, working with your mom in the backyard, which is all true. And she said just all kinds of funny stories, but she talked about probiotics in her food. And I said, I've been giving her probiotics since I switched her to raw, and she really likes them. But that day I had run out and kind of like thrown the bottle in the garbage. And I guess she thought that I didn't have any more. So she was all concerned that now she doesn't get probiotics anymore. I said, no, the new bottle's on the counter. It's for the dinner. I have to open it. But they're so observant that she was worried about it. And we talked about it for a good 5 minutes about these probiotics. So sometimes it's just the fear of doing the thing. I offered one of my good friends, her birthday was recently at the end of June. And I offered to her to do a communication with her husky for her birthday. She's like, I don't know. What if he says things that I don't hear? I'm like, I did the exact same thing. Honestly, I will do it if you want. If you don't, that's cool. But I'm just telling you, it's probably not going to be as bad as you think it is.
Yeah.
Which it wasn't. But sometimes it's just that fear of getting past it.
Yeah.
But now that we've kind of made that initial connection, now sometimes she just sends me information whenever she wants.
Mm.
If I'm out somewhere, she'll be like, hey, look, there's something outside. And just kind of like trots over, and I see her sitting in her spot looking out the window. Like, oh, I'm glad you're having fun. You're talking a little bit. But it's interesting, and I know you sometimes work on your own dog. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Well, I think with all my pets, past and present, I've always communicated. Always. I've never had that, I'm scared of. For me, it was always kind of natural.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember once, oh my God, she cracked me up. I was trying to teach her a new trick. And I can't remember what it was because it's been a few years now, but and I think I had a trick or something. I can't remember all the details, but I was teaching her a trick. And all of a sudden she sat and she looked at me, and she said to me telepathically, she said, I don't know what the purpose of that trick is, but I'm really not interested. Like, I don't understand what the purpose of that is. And I just looked at her because it was hard. Like, she was not into it. Like, it was a struggle. And I looked at her and I was like, I did not expect that. at all. I was like, okay, let's stop right there. Like, there's no point. And that was just so funny. But I find that those casual conversations, it's easy, it's flowing, there's no problem. But I find that when there is an issue, could be like health wise or like in the household, whatever that may be, I find that when there's a problematic, the communication is getting more difficult because I start, I have, like, I'm worried. I have expectations about, what I should or what I should do, what I shouldn't do. Um, and so because I'm in that state, I'm no longer, grounded, and it's harder for me to receive messages from her. And I know that for animal communicators in general, that's usually something that comes up, whenever it's your own animal and there's an issue and you really want to try to fix it or get insight from your animal. That's when it's difficult, and when, an animal communicator may search for, another animal communicator to get answers.
Mhm. We tend to pick up on our own animals' worry when we do that, which is kind of why I resisted, because Kaya and I are very connected. And for a while, her digestive issues were because of my digestive issues.
Mhm.
And then I went vegan and problem solved. But for a while, I knew that every time my stomach was having issues, that was causing her stomach to have issues. And then I felt bad. So for me, it's, I know I'm doing this to you and I feel terrible about it. So I'm trying to help her with her food, but she's not showing improvement because I'm not showing improvement.
Mhm.
So it's hard to communicate about those things because I know what's causing it.
Mhm.
I'm trying to explain it to her that I got the message. I understand that you're trying to mirror this back to me, but I don't need you to do it anymore.
Mhm.
I need you to let it go, because then I'm worried about you and I'm not focused on my own. So it's kind
Mhm.
of counterintuitive that way, but I can't take it personally. You kind of have to, anything they have to say, you kind of have to go into it with an open mind, which for me, when I do Kaya, I start the session, I'm like, hey, Kaya, it's mom. We're going into this, and I just want to let you know I'm not going to take anything you say personally. I won't be offended. I'll still love you and give you treats and take you on walks. This is just something that I wanted to talk to you about, and then I'll bring up whatever it is. But she's usually very talkative. The first animal communicator that we had said she's very eloquent.
Mhm.
It takes time to think about what she wants to say and pick specific words so it comes out really well.
Mhm.
But she's very easy to communicate with.
Mhm.
And the first time I taught Reiki, she allowed us to use her as a demo for the level 2 distance Reiki. And my students were shocked because she was so eloquent, right? And I know when you learn Reiki, it's not explicitly telepathic communication, but you're projecting that energy. And they just said her energy is so similar to yours, it's hard to separate them.
Mhm.
They feel so similar. So sometimes it's being able to appreciate that you're two different beings, but also that they're very connected to you and will sometimes just show you what you're not ready to see.
Mhm.
So it's a learning process when you work on your own animals. I know I've learned a lot from Kaya. I have notes on her first two. They were mostly about car rides and her food, but
Yeah.
she has a lot of opinions, so hard sometimes to pick that up.
Oh yeah. Now we learn so much about ourselves, being with animals, just being with animals. Like, it's yeah, they reflect so much, back at you, that, it's yeah, and that mirroring effect is very interesting, and that's something that comes up quite often, I find, and whenever there's an issue with a pet and in animal communication, like mirroring effect, yeah, it's very common.
Actually, I think it was yesterday, somebody posted an article, I think it was from The Guardian, that dogs' anxiety levels mirror that of their humans, which most people who are in the pet professional industry know that, but pet parents are always shocked to see that. And I have some Reiki clients that when their dog gets really stressed out, they kind of have to stop and look at their own energy and be like, okay, maybe I was really nervous going into this. And they kind of just pick up on that vibe, but it's a very individual experience, but they're very connected.
Yeah.
Do you have any other topics that you want to touch on? Because I think we've covered everything on my list except for some stories.
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot. I think there was something I wanted to mention, but I can't remember what it was. No, I can't remember. So
Working with rescue animals. I just thought of it because I'm looking at the animals' names that I wrote down for stories, and one of them, I'm holding a smoky quartz. It's a grounding crystal. It helps. I worked on a dog that had been rescued, and they didn't know, the owners that adopted her didn't know anything about her past home. And the SPCA that they got her from did, but the owners didn't. So I did a session with her, and she kept talking about a girl, that she wanted to know where the girl was. And young dog, it was a pit bull mix, and they couldn't figure out, the owner couldn't figure out what girl I was talking about because she doesn't have a daughter. She hasn't interacted with any young females. And so I asked Willow, the dog, about it. And she said, the place that I used to live, there was a young girl there that was really nice to me. And I guess it was the daughter of the owner, because she said that she got surrendered to the shelter because the dad didn't have time to look after her anymore. But the young girl had her heart broken when they took this dog to the shelter, and she never saw the little girl again, and she was devastated. And I explained to her kind of the background from what I got from her, but that the little girl was safe, she was happy, and she's going to have a good life, that kind of thing. But sometimes we can't give that closure to them because we don't know. And if we don't have access to someone who knows that information, then we can't get it. But I find that rescue animals, or any animals that don't know the background, whether it be medical or physically they lived in this place or emotional background, there's a lot that can be left unresolved for a really long time, because a lot of behavioral issues now stem from past emotional trauma that nobody knows about. Whether you got the dog as a puppy and it was out on a play date one time and you weren't there and something happened, unless the person who was watching them tells you, you will never know what happens, right? And I've had the case with another dog I've worked on. I think I told the story in the last one. So I'll summarize real quick. There was a pit bull I was working on that was rescued from an abusive home. He got adopted and then went to a daycare where he got abused by the female staff. And then he had difficulty adjusting with adult males and adult females and other dogs. And the owner couldn't figure out why, because she didn't know either of the other two triggering traumas. And we worked through it. The dog is now happy. He has play dates and everything's great.
Yay.
Just to show you how far they can take it, because he couldn't be around other dogs. He had to wear a muzzle when he's outside because he is a pit bull. He couldn't be fed or touched by other people. The owner couldn't have anybody over to her house because the dog was very protective of his boundaries. And now she can have people over, and it's just complete 180 on her life, and it makes a better quality of life for not only her dog, but for her and people in her life.
Yeah.
Just from learning something simple, like your dog had a past trauma this is what happened.
Mm.
So sometimes the conversations are easier, they're still difficult,
Mm.
but the result is so positive working with rescue animals,
Mm.
I find, just because there's so much background that you can give that other people don't know.
Yeah.
So, do you work with rescue animals, and can you tell us some stories if you have?
I'm thinking about one, and that's a few years ago. And that lady had rescued a dog, but the dog was very aggressive towards her husband. And so they asked me to, communicate with the dog to know what was going on. And the dog told me that previously she had many litters, and every single time they took away the puppies from her, and that was like a man. That was like heartbreaking. And so she had somehow developed, that fear of having her puppies being taken away from uh, men, and so she had that um, aggression towards men in general. And so I passed on the message, and that's funny because the lady is um, she works with flower essences. She's quite intuitive, and she kind of she thought that may have been the case. Like we didn't have access to the information, so we couldn't tell for sure. But we started working with flower essences, and sometimes it works immediately, but with that dog, it was a process. Like I don't know how she's doing now, because that was like 3 or 4 years ago. But I recommended some flower essences as well, and it got slowly better. But sometimes the trauma is just so deep that it's something that can be fixed like right away. So it may take time, or sometimes it will never be kind of normal and back to um, you know like regular um, situation. Everything is fine. Sometimes it's just, yeah, a lifetime um, work, to get to help the animal and the person. So
That's a good topic to touch on, actually, because some people with energy therapy, they think it's kind of like a one time and it'll
mm,
be fixed. And I have had cases like that, but most of them, depending on how long they've had the issue, it's actually more of a maintenance type session. But I did have one that was fixed after one,
mm,
and the cat lives in Austria. And I did this session. She's a friend of mine, and her cat all of a sudden just stopped eating. Perfectly healthy cat, couldn't figure out why he wasn't eating. And she's starting to get concerned because it was on day, I think, 2 or 3 without eating. And so I did a session, and he said, "It's too noisy when I eat." And I said, "Well, when did the noise start?" And he said, "About 2 days ago." I said, "Do you know what happened, or what did something change in your environment?" And he said, "Yeah, these people moved in next door and they're doing a renovation. And his food bowl, literally like their house, her house, the window with the bowl."
mm,
So it was so noisy for him. And I said, "Would you feel more comfortable if your bowl was further away from the noise?" And he said, "Yes." So all we did was move his bowl to the other side of the house and put it in the room furthest from the noise. Immediately started eating again, never had an issue.
mm,
But something so simple, because she was concerned that, he had maybe a parasite, or he's going to go take him to the vet and get him tested for all these things. And when it's completely, I mean, the cost of the session, but it's nothing she has to pay to fix. It's kind of just do something in the environment or change your behavior in a way, and the problem is resolved. But sometimes it's a deeper maintenance. The owner wants you to talk to them while they're transitioning through something or a
Mhm.
change in their life, like they're moving, or someone's going on vacation, or someone's getting a new job and their routine is changing.
Yeah.
I find that most of them tend to be more than one, unless
Mm.
it's kind of a person just wants to try it out, see what they have to say type of session.
Yeah.
But usually people come in and whether they know it or not, they have a reason for
Mm.
why they want to do it. They have a deep-seated question they want to know the answer to.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is usually maintenance. But
Mhm. Yeah.
okay, I think we're at our about 1 hour. So, do you have anything else you want to say?
Uh, no, I'm just thinking about a story right now. I don't know why. It was really touching um, session with a dog that was diagnosed with cancer, and that was like stage 4. So that was like um, that was towards the end, of his life for him. And his guardian contacted me to know what she could do to help him. And when I connected with that dog, I had so many emotions that I started crying. It was just so, those emotions were, there was like trauma, there was like, it was quite heavy. And, but I could tell that it didn't belong to, those emotions didn't belong to the dog, it belonged to the guardian. And the dog talked to me about, what his guardian was going through, and he wasn't worried about transitioning at all. And animals have a, they perceive death completely differently than us. For them, it's just, a transition towards something else. They don't have that fear. They don't. They see it completely differently. So for him, um, that wasn't an issue. But he passed on all that information about, his guardian. And that was so touching. And in the end, I said, so, like, what do you want to do, like, with your guardian? Is there something you'd like to, like, any activity or anything? And he said, you know what, I just want her to keep massaging me. And he showed me like himself being on his back and being massaged, by his guardian, and just meditating with his guardian. And the guardian confirmed that that's something she was doing, and she was also meditating. And that was all he wanted. That was all he wanted. He wasn't worried about, um, you know, transitioning or anything. And the guardian also confirmed that she went through like trauma, and she was, on a healing journey. Um, but it was just a very touching story, and I don't know why I felt like I needed to share that. So that's all.
Beautiful story. Because sometimes animals do hold on for their owners rather than when they are emotionally ready to leave. But I thought what you said about them perceiving death very differently than we do, because for a lot of people, that's the end. There's nothing after that. But for most people that are more spiritually minded and they try something like animal communication, usually they're in more in the realm of you'll be reincarnated into another being and you'll have another life. So usually I find those people are more open-minded about
Mm,
it. They're less concerned, but it's the emotional connection to that animal. So sometimes for them, it's nice to know that when they pass over, they can still talk to them
mm,
telepathically or have an animal communicator do it so they don't it's not kind of you'll never talk to or see that animal again.
Mm.
It's kind of more loosely
Yeah.
an ending. And I've had animals that have passed over and their owner is still grieving.
Mm.
And the animal wants me to let them know that they are going to come back as another dog for that person.
Mm.
Which sometimes one of my friends lost her German Shepherd last year. He had anal cancer.
Mm.
And she's been looking for a puppy. She's trying to sort it all out, find a really good one. And I offered to do one of my sessions for her. And she's had German Shepherds for a long time. She's had about 4 or 5. So when I started the session, there's just this whole group of German Shepherds. I'm going, I'm here to talk to this one. We're all this dog. We're all the exact same dog. And I'm like, wow, that's so interesting. Because there's 6 of them, and they're all the same dog. And he's like, I'm going to come back to the same owner. She's still got some learning to do. But it's just, they're so committed to helping us get through a certain lesson. Because a lot of people, when I took the animal communication course, she described that sometimes animals are sent here to teach us a specific lesson, and they'll keep coming back until we learn it. And then once we learn it, then they'll pass over or go to somebody else. But just knowing that gives a lot of people hope, which I find is a really beautiful thing. But,
just wanted to add that, when an animal is reincarnating into another dog, it's also important to understand that it's going to be a different dog with a different personality. It's not going to be the exact same dog, because sometimes people expect, oh, I'm going to recognize my dog, and yes, you may recognize some aspect of the personality or things that the previous pet used to do, but it's going to be a different animal with his own personality, so it won't be the same dog or cat or whatever.
Which is important, because that's not how it's portrayed in the movie A Dog's Purpose. It's the same dog, but when you get to the end, he knows a behavior that the first dog used to do, which I guess could be the case, but he exhibits this behavior. It's a very complex series of tricks type of thing. And the guy's like, oh, yep, that's my dog. But it's not always going to be like a eureka moment. It could be, they exhibit similar behaviors or tendencies to like certain things over other things. It's not going to be 100%. So yeah, good thing to keep in mind. Can you tell our viewers how to find you on social media or however you like to be found?
Yes, so on my website is anahatahealingcircle.com, and same on social media, like on Facebook. If you type in the search bar on in Facebook, it's gonna be Reiki with Sonia. The title is still, the page is still Anahata Healing Circle, but if you do a search, it's Reiki with Sonia, Sonia, and Instagram, it's the Anahata Healing Circle.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Whew. Well, it was so nice chatting with you, and I hope this video, no internet connection went out, so I don't have to take it down and edit it, which is fantastic. I can just
Woo!
That's a long video to download. But I'm glad that all worked out, and thanks for tuning in for all of you guys that are watching it or watching the replay. And we will bring you more animal content all the time if you keep watching. I promise. Have a fabulous rest of your Thursday. I'm used to saying Tuesday because my lives are on Tuesday. On Thursday, and we'll see you soon. I guess there's no...
Thank you, Jessie. Thank you so much. It was so nice talking to you and talking about animal communication.
Oh, real quick. I don't teach animal communication, but I'm teaching small animal acupressure in the Greater Toronto area. The class is 2/3 full. There's only 2 spots left. So if you want to join, it's in October. The information is all on my website, birchanimалwellness.com. Under the Learning tab, you'll see a page called Animal Acupressure. All the information is there. Perfect. Okay. Now I can sign off. I will see you guys soon. Sonia, have a fabulous rest of your day. I think
Thank you.
we'll still get to talk when we stop the broadcast, but anyway. Enjoy the sunny time, my fellow Canadians.